Hello, hello, welcome, and thanks for dropping by today. I am Marina Orms, the founder of Astrology Heals at astrologyheals.com, and I'm doing a series of interviews with badass women of different zodiac signs. And today I have with me Sherry Horn Hassan, and Sherry is an Amazon #1 best-selling author, and she's an editor, and she helps you move from chaos to clarity and co-create your future through astrological insight. She is also a professional astrologer, and we've known each other for many years, and I love Sherry, and I'm super excited to have her here, so welcome.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Marina.
Sherry. Yep.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be thought of as a badass, so that's cool.
Nice. And Sherry is a Taurus. So for whatever reason, I've been having a hard time finding earth signs who are willing to do badass interviews. So I'm
really,
yeah. So thanks for being a guinea pig.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Awesome. And so what would you say makes you a badass?
Well, I think being born with the sun in Taurus, it gives me and others a lot of patience. So, there's two things. One is that I think it gives us a kind of equilibrium, which is a sort of a stable foundation from which to exhibit patience. We're not anxious to get to the next thing like some of the other signs, or anxious to move because we can't sit too long. So we have the patience to think things through or look at things from different sides. And, the key word for Taurus is serenity. Mm-hmm. So I think what we really crave, and that gives us, again, the capability to be patient, is calm. Mm-hmm. And, again, an equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And that serves us well because we're not running around like chickens without a head. There's also a certain amount of physical strength, and I would extrapolate that out to not just be physical. I think we have a kind of inner strength because we have an inner core, an earthy core, that allows us to keep our little hoofies, I say, on the ground, on terra firma. Yeah. So when things go crazy around us, we're like, okay, you do this, I'll do that, where's the bridge, where's the car, okay, let me think, yeah. Let's ask him a question. There's a more of the ability to sort of take the time that's needed through the kind of patience so that you can then exhibit the kind of strength that's needed to deal with any situation. And then, we want to return to an environment or an atmosphere of calm. And then when calm comes, peace follows. And that's what serenity is about.
I love that. And you, but even though I know you've shared with me in the past, sometimes that it takes time to get things done. But when you get there, do you find that it's more rewarding for having taken that time?
Yeah, I think that the thing about the Taurus personality also is it's the tortoise and the hare. We'd rather move slowly and cautiously and, take our time. And I think maybe some of that is also, it depends on some of the other things that make up a person's, personality astrologically. It's not just the sun, but because it's so grounding, it's like we will put one foot in front of another, which is kind of like what I said before. I've found in my life that keeping hold of mentally the thought, it's one day at a time. Mm-hmm. And that one thing builds upon another. If you're going to build a brick wall, you're going to start with the first layer of bricks, and then you're going to put the second and the third and so on. So again, it's cautious. Did we put enough cement between the bricks? Did we do the research beforehand to make sure that whatever we're erecting is going to be solid enough to withstand, the environment or the test of time? So there is something very strong in that. I think it's part of what gives Taurus, a reputation of being strong, because what we build to last.
Mm.
There's another thing also about quality. There's a quality versus quantity. You know, they say, and I find this to be true personally, I'd rather have the smallest, the tiniest little real diamond than I would have the biggest cubic zirconium or whatever other artificial, material they come up with to make it look like you have a lot of bling,
Yeah. Yeah. Genuine, real. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, uh, give me a couple of examples of what you feel most proud of that you've been able to create over time like that.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Let me think. Well, I mean, I have a ninth house sun. And for those who don't know, ninth house is Jupiter ruled, but it represents, among other things, it represents publishing. So my whole career was spent in publishing, first as a trade journalist for different industries, then as a marketing manager for a not major national nonprofit, and then as a book editor. So I feel like, you know, that has contributed to helping me build a kind of step-by-step reputation. I mean, in between and along the way, I got into astrology. And so, now I have my own radio show, which also falls under media, which is what publishing falls under in the ninth house connotations, and again, it's just one of the definitions of the ninth house. But being able to get to a point where I'm clear about what my purpose is, because that's a large part of my mission, is to take information and to be slow and steady. And you know I don't know that this is necessarily Taurian, but it's like I loved being a journalist, and I love doing my radio show, which is an astrological show, because I talk to many different people and I love to get different viewpoints. And through my own learning of taking the time to decide who I would study with and whose books I would read, etc., I was able to build upon my own philosophy in terms of astrology. And I think that's important, because for whatever reason, I'm just one of those people like you, Marina, who just was like, wow, this astrology stuff is great, because once you get into it, most of us have it as a passion. But I think it's more than that for me too, because maybe it's the Taurus Jupiter energies, conjoined together, that it provides me with a kind of philosophy of life, and that gives me faith, and that gives me a huge foundation. And so people find that kind of foundation from many different areas in their own lives, but for me, that's the foundation I have been able to build upon.
Love that. That's awesome. And so, what are the challenges of being a Taurus? What kinds of things do you have to overcome?
I was waiting for you to get to that.
Yeah.
I write a new moon and a full moon report. And a lot of times what happens is I start out writing the new moon with all the negatives. And then I have to stop and go, no, that's the full moon energy, because the new moon is like, oh, everything's great. We need partnership in Libra because the new moon just happened, right? And we want to talk about all the positive stuff. And I always go immediately to the negatives, because I'm like, well, if you're partnership oriented, you don't like conflict. Well, if you never stand up for yourself, things turn out to be so happy for you. So with Taurus, and this is pretty much anything you'll find in the standard astrological text, the biggest issues that someone with a Taurian nature or Taurus energy in their chart will find is stubbornness, because it's a fixed sign, so it doesn't want change. What do you mean? It's fine. It's fine. I'll get to it later. My own son, my SON, has Mercury in Taurus, and one of the things I noticed with him is, it's like, honey, would you take out the garbage? And he's like, sure. And then an hour later, he's still lying on the couch, like, honey, I don't think you took out the garbage. And he's like, I'll do it. And then the next morning comes, you maybe said it one other time before 10 o'clock and everybody goes to sleep. And in the morning, the garbage is still in the house and the garbage truck is leaving. So, there's two things in that. There's stubbornness and there's laziness. And,
Mm.
it's hard to use a word like lazy because it sounds accusatory and it sounds judgmental. But I think it's something, when we think of the negatives about any sign, we have to look at our own personalities and our own lives. And I believe that a large part of doing such introspective work through the use of astrological insight is to say, well, maybe I could be a little lazy in that area. Maybe if I worked a little bit harder, I
Mm.
could accomplish a little bit more. So I
Mm.
think, we dig in our heels sometimes to our own detriment, which becomes like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Mhm.
And we can just be like, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, which leads to procrastination. There can be a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I think just sheer inertia sometimes with Taurus. It's like, it's just so comfy here on the couch, or I haven't finished eating my bowl of ice cream.
Yeah.
And in fact, I might have another. So
Why
yeah, when
not?
I'm done, I'll do it
Yeah.
right.
If it
It's
wo- if
great.
it
Have you
works,
tried it? Have some.
yeah. If it
Horses
works.
don't mind sharing. It's like, come sit at the trough with me, and we'll
Yeah.
have a nice, ice cream sundae or whatever. So, I mean, needless to say, also,
Mm.
Tauruses might not know when enough is enough. And
Mm.
that's in the realm of things like food. But it can
Mm.
also be money and stuff like that, the things that give us pleasure. Because Taurus is also about the five senses. It's a physical sign because it's an earth sign. So what gives us pleasure? And I think, where we put up resistance, those are the negatives, right? Because maybe we think we're supposed to do something out of duty or obligation, for example. And so we delay giving ourselves pleasure, or other times we give ourselves too much pleasure and we deny that we need to take care of some of our obligations. So it can work either way.
Yeah, I would say, or I would think, that getting kind of stuck in a rut would be a pitfall.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that to me is
Yeah.
inertia.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find sometimes, you get into routines,
Yeah.
and whether they're life routines or whether they're work routines or whether they're routines with particular friends. And sometimes I think Taurus finds it very difficult to deviate from those routines. It's not quite the same as Capricorn, which is like, this is the way we've done it. We always did it. My father did it this way. My father's father before me,
Yeah.
um, you're like a literalist of the Constitution. We have to go back to 1787 or whatever and keep doing it the same way. It's not quite the same. Taurus is more like, I think it's more torn between just feeling like if it ain't broke, then you don't need to fix it.
Yeah.
And so there can be the extreme where the house is on fire and Taurus is still going, well, I haven't finished my grapes.
Yeah.
Or I haven't finished binge watching my favorite show on Netflix.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So there can be a kind of disassociation from what's happening in life because you're just basically going, I'm not going to move.
Cool.
I mean, in
Yeah.
that sense too, if you don't move fast enough, it's, the benefit of Taurus energy is being cautious so that you don't get burned, right? But the deficit is not moving at all and making any changes. And one of the things that I think you and I would agree on, it's not related per se to the Taurian archetype, but life is about evolution and change. And if we don't evolve, we won't grow. And if we don't grow, we won't adapt. And if we don't adapt, we won't survive. So Taurus can kind of deny the survival part by thinking that in the minute or in the minutia, it's about, taking care of the basic needs, food, water, shelter, clothing, and then you extrapolate on from there, money and goods and houses and cars and all that. Because a Taurus also might want to collect too much stuff and not let go of it. But if you recognize that the only constant is change in the universe, because energy doesn't die, it just morphs. You have to kind of, at some point as a Taurus, say to yourself, well, maybe change wouldn't be so bad. We don't have to stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my last question, was just what would you suggest for dealing with those, with inertia and the routines, and maybe helping another Taurus woman who is working on these things to, what would you suggest to help shift those?
Well, I think probably taking a look at where you, because Taurus is also related to values. And when I brought up the five senses and pleasure, it's really that we tend to value the things that give us the most pleasure. So, there's a couple of different ways to go from that. One is that, is what gives you pleasure something that you truly value because you've thought about it and you've really given it some really deep, you know, time, right? Because you and I, Marina, both know that there are other factors in people's lives that can influence what they think is valuable and what gives them pleasure. And in that, I don't want to digress too much, but we go to things like your moon sign, because what feels familiar might not always be what's the best for you. So trying to discern the difference between the two can be difficult, but I think it's also worthwhile. It's a worthwhile endeavor. Because am I just stuck in this rut because I'm doing things over and over, because I like the routine, and I never thought about the fact that it is a routine that excludes me from thinking maybe outside the box a little more, or about making a change because I'm resistant to change. The other thing behind change, of course, can be fear. So, trying to say, well, if I make this change, what is it that I'm afraid of? And then really taking the Taurian time to be, as I said, cautious. It's not so much caution. I mean, the impetus is caution, right? Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to lose out. Nobody wants to make the wrong decision. So, but you can't stay too long with that. So you do want to be cautious because you don't want to overlook anything. But then at some point, a decision has to be made. And so once you make the decision, that's what enables change. So I think looking at some of these things on a deeper level to see, what really has value in your life. And then to determine, whether you've been, because it's not to say that what you value now is wrong. That's not what I mean at all. It's like, relationships, for example, right? They serve a certain purpose for a certain time, and maybe you're not getting the value out of it that you used to. So it doesn't mean the relationship has to end by any means, but evaluating what's not giving you pleasure versus what's giving you pleasure, sitting down and communicating about it, that's being cautious, you see? And then you get feedback, and then decisions can be made.
I love that. I love just the idea of taking a step back and looking at what you're doing. I mean, I think that's good advice for all of us. And in the case of a Taurus, like, the tendency you describe to keep going with what's working. Why change it if it's working? But there might be some good reasons to reevaluate, and so consciously taking the time to do that.
I think a good mantra for Taurus is the only constant is change. And it doesn't mean that change has to come like a lightning bolt out of the blue. That's what Taurus fears, right? But that change is evolutionary. It's part of evolutionary growth.
Love it. I love it. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing yourself with us today, and for some fabulous Taurus insights.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for asking me. This was fun, and I hope it's helpful for people who are listening.
Awesome. So
and
sharing
all my Taurus gals out there, yo!
Yeah. Woohoo!
Badass. Be a badass.
Be a badass. That's right. Keep the constant of change coming.
That's right.
So Sherry is at karmicevolution.com. Check out her radio show. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Marina.